Hey, greetings, everybody, and welcome to Mahamudra for the People. um, Again, for those who are just joining in, I have been going through Saraha's King Doha, or Song of the King, as it's sometimes translated, and it looks like today we're going to finish this. And which is great. It's a great text. And then next week, I will not be available. I'll be with Lama and our dear friend Tequila will be in doing some retreat together in Wisconsin. And although the three of us will be in conversation at the University of Wisconsin on Sunday, on kind of this intersection of Bhumi Sparsha and environmental justice. And that will be streamed for free. I don't have all the information, but it looks like Eric is on the edge, on the verge, on the edge of the verge. So please feel free to sign up if you like. Again, it's free. And yeah, so Tequila is absolutely incredible. She's my root teacher's daughter. She's a very, 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 very close friend of mine, basically family. And she runs the Loka initiative at the University of Wisconsin, which seeks to pair religious leaders around climate change. And so she does incredible work. She prior to that, she did a program at Stanford University. Prior to that, she did a program at Yale University. Prior to that, she set up Koryug with His Holiness Karmapa. The Koryug was this amazing program to address environmental concerns for the Himalayan communities, especially monastic communities. And so for example, with respect to the Karmakadji lineage, it's because of Koryug that there is not only a large emphasis on recycling, planting trees, developing response to global warming, shifts in climate and all of this. And actually in Sikkim, this has been seen actually most notably in the kind of intensity of the monsoon season and an increase in landslides. And so I've seen this over the past 2 decades, really, like this increase in landslides and the impact of all of this. And then prior to that, Tequila worked for World Wildlife Fund. She worked in the Mekong River Delta. She's the only reason why I got involved in Facebook in the first place, was to be able to be in touch with her back then, with the early O's. So anyway, it should be an interesting conversation, and I guess Richie Davies will be there also, who Tequila works with. So anyway, but this also means that unfortunately, Mahamudra for the people, I won't be here for Mahamudra for the people. Maybe there can just be a practice session. And then, but the week after that, we can perhaps move into the next song, which is Saraha's Queen Doha. So this song that he sang for the Queen. So he sang one for the king, one for the queen, and one for the people, as best we know. A little controversial sometimes. So let's take a brief moment and perhaps we can sit for a second, just as a way of touching into the experience of mind. As we do, perhaps we can open up to the fact that, this is not a time-based thing, right? So we actually have the capacity to fall right into the direct experience of clarity of mind, luminosity of mind, the emptiness of mind, all of these things. Um, so we'll sit for just a bit, maybe 5 minutes or so, but really try to let yourself just fall right in, right, as if you're falling backwards onto a bed of flowers or something like this, right? Just fall back directly into the nature of mind. All right, let's make sure. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Let me just change the sound setting. Okay, great. So, the last stanza that we left off in this text goes like this. Concepts of unity and diversity are impotent. Awareness alone brings freedom to sentient beings. Cognition of radiance is strong meditation. Abide in a calm, quiescent mind. And so these ideas of unity and diversity, or one thing, many things, ideas. We can extend this out, of course, ideas of shape and size, ideas around we call first discursive thought, definitely, but comparative analysis, for example, taking into consideration all of the thingness, the diversity of thingness of all things you might be surrounded by, right? Whether it's unitary or arises in multiplicity, or something that's large or small, or positive or negative, or valued or lacking value. All of this is, ultimately impotent, right? It's not. It fails to actually accurately capture the essence, right, of what everything is. Awareness alone brings freedom to sentient beings. Cognition of radiance is strong meditation. Abide in a calm, quiescent mind. So awareness alone, this is like saying, awareness alone is the medicine, right? And actually you find this this term, the soul sufficient remedy. Actually, Gampopa brings this up, right? That Mahamudra, or resting into this vast, spacious awareness, is the sole sufficient remedy for all things. And so resting directly into the natural state is the sole sufficient remedy, in that when in this place of experience, nothing else really seems to matter, right? Our everything that we create, right? Kind of like a big bang, right? Boom, from our moments of distinction, from our moments of discursiveness, analysis, all this is like the big bang that creates the entire universe, and all of the multiplicity, all of the uniqueness of all of this actually dissolves. It's kind of like a reverse big bang, by resting directly into the nature of mind, right? It kind of brings everything back to natural, pure being. So that was the last stanza. So moving on, Saraha says, reaching the joy swollen land, the power of seeing expands with delight and laughter, and without separation in the chase. Right. So, reaching the joy swollen land, this land of open, beautiful, ripe blissfulness, kind of like if reality was a ripe nectarine or peach or apricot, a bowl of ripe cherries, right? The power of seeing expands with delight and laughter, and without separation in the chase. So from this experience of non-dual mind, right, everything becomes blissful, right? And when we say blissful, or this kind of like ripe joy, right, this is not necessarily like we're tingly all the time, kind of experiencing that kind of bliss necessarily, right? But there is a freedom, a spaciousness, an ease, a confidence, a relaxation, an ability to hold the kind of multiplicity of contradictions that seems to happen, or seems to appear from time to time. There's not a stickiness, there's not resistance, there's this freedom, right? the power of seeing expands, right? So this means we are able to behold, not necessarily just with visual consciousness, but we are able to see more. So it's kind of like, if I were in a bad mood today and I looked at everyone's face here, I'd say, oh, Eric definitely looks dull and in a bad mood, and then, oh, Malika's trying not to smile, and I would just be projecting my bad moodness onto everybody, be like, oh, Richard is constantly sour, all of this stuff. And this is just my, like, my projection, the limitation of my ability to actually see and behold. Right. But when we let go of, the tightness of discursive mind, our obsession with trying to figure everything out, our obsession with trying to find meaning with things, and we're just able to let things be in an unadulterated state, unadulterated by this mind, right? Unadulterated by intellect, unadulterated by concept. Then we are actually able to really see, right? We can see others for who they are, right? Not the projection, right? We can hear others. We can be open to the world, to things. It's interesting, especially coming out of the pandemic or wherever we are right now. This kind of cocoon-like time of a couple of years of a lot of people actually being kind of like in this world that they've created to survive, and really some of it for maybe Americans was even worse because we had Trump going on for some of that too. So we had all these reasons to need to surround ourselves by things in order to survive. Which is good. This is a human survival mechanism, right? But the problem sometimes with this kind of stuff is that then our world becomes exceedingly small, and it becomes very difficult to actually see things for what they are, right? And so in there's this common metaphor, for example, of the nature of mind being like the sky, the blueness of the sky, and then conceptuality, conceptual thought, discursiveness being like the clouds, right? And the clouds are not necessarily a problem, and the clouds naturally dissipate, right? And the luminosity of the sky is able to be beheld authentically. What is also being pointed out here is that, when we are able to rest into this, natural luminosity, this stainlessness of mind, right? The power of seeing expands, right? We're able to, there's a vastness, right? There's a freedom, there's a ease, there's a joy, right? So this kind of coming back to the joy swollen land with delight and laughter and without separation in the chase, right? So when we are in this place of ease, relaxation, joy, I'm going to repeat it one more time because it's really important. Joy, right? Then everything settles, right? Everything is spacious, everything is free, right? The joy piece, and we're going to see this a little bit more, is so important. It's so interesting. Sometimes it's interesting to read about Buddhism because there are all sorts of different kinds of interpretations of what practice it really is, or what the height of practice is supposed to be, or the fruit of practice. And sometimes you'll find, dispassion be described, rest into a state of dispassion. That sounds very unpleasant to me, right? Not because I'm addicted to passion, but because especially, like this, one particular line, reaching the joy swollen land. Like, how lovely to let our practice move us or guide us to an experience that is joy swollen, right? That there is wonderment, there is open curiosity about things, that we don't need to exert as much energy as we have been to kind of prop up the values that are important to us, right? The values that are important to us, no problem, right? But we don't need to, have them buttress everything that just happens to be. I was in Mexico City recently, and there's the main cathedral right in the center of Mexico City. And the last time I was there was a very long time ago. It was 1996. And so after the earthquake that happened a little prior to then, the entirety of this massive cathedral was supported by scaffolding inside. And so the exterior isn't exceptional. It's gorgeous. The inside is exceptional. But the last time I had seen it, there was all this scaffolding holding up, kind of like, distracts the eye, right? And then this time, no, there was no scaffolding. And the joy and the ease and the beauty of just sitting in this, returning to this structure without all the scaffolding that was holding it up. And the scaffolding is kind of like our values and our religion and our needs and our fears and even our hopes. Hopes become scaffolding, holding everything up. Oh, I hope I get enlightened. I hope this all works out. I hope this hasn't been a waste of my time. There's that a little bit more, maybe hopefully kind of, forward thinking positivist, right? But then there's all the like I'm running away from fear. I'm running away from, anxiety. And then we prop up all the scaffolding to hold that position up, right? So I was saying, just like, let it all go, right? All that work, all that energy, all that fear, all that running away, all that running towards something. My root teacher, obviously she's Sikkimese and very from this, very, very, very important Dharma family in Sikkim. Her father was the Thangka painter for 16th Karmapa and had done all the murals at Roomtek, old Roomtek and new Roomtek. And he was a great practitioner, and he was close with 16th Karmapa, with all the heart sons, with Dogo Khyentse Rinpoche, with Trungpa Rinpoche, with everybody who passed through Sikkim. They met and knew, and most, especially the Karma Kagyu folks, but also Dojubchen, all of these people stayed with my root teacher's family when they were coming down from Tibet to Sikkim. And so everything about this family was rooted in Dharma practice. And what is exceptionally important to recognize is this flow, right? And Anizangmo in particular had this kind of ability to be able to instill a sense of confidence and a direct experience of the natural state, especially with respect to lack of fear of separation. There is nothing, we don't have to fear anything. We don't have to fear, like when I met her, I was so structured as a person. This is the way it is. I want to be like this. This is what Dharma is, and she never really slapped me around, but she did kind of, emotionally and point out, this is how rigid you are. Like I was the scaffolding trying to hold up, not only that, my idea, definitely my idea of Buddhism, right? And then projecting it onto everything else. Right. And the thing is that with all of this practice, with all of these great masters, really technically all they are doing is flowing from one place to another, one life to another. All Dharma is this open experience of flow and ease. Right. And structure helps sometimes, right, to kind of protect, to guide, to all, do all this stuff. But I think that it gets really complicated, especially for folks, from kind of more Western backgrounds, where we seem to need to hold on to structure very tightly for fear of, I mean, ironically, fear of direct experience, right? Fear of this individual experience, right? Fear of letting this kind of grow within us and experience, the subjectivity that is an important part of this practice too, right? We're very objective centric in this way, right? I need to know the objective truth, the ultimate truth, right? The same way we want to know, like, what is right, what is good, all this stuff, right? But why do we need to know this? It's not usually for our own liberation. It's for some other reason, right? It's often as a way to justify our existence, to justify our fears, to justify our hopes, to show that we're in the right place at the right time. And the truth is that there is no right place. There's no right time. There's no time. There's no place. There's no anything, right? And not in this kind of dispassionate way, but in a way of freedom. Like, we don't need to, like, it's like, I was school ended last week for my young kids, and I was picking them up on the last day, and there are all these like young kids running around screaming on the sidewalk, saying school's out, school's out. Made me think of Alice Cooper. And it's so funny because it's like, most of these kids really enjoy school, right? They enjoy the structure, they enjoy the social, kind of component of it, right? Their friends, so important to them, right? But they've kind of imbibed this other structure of like, school's out, screw it all. And it all of this kind of highlights how susceptible we are, I think you could say, to structure, right? To imbibing it. It's really sticky. So anyway, the power of seeing expands with delight and laughter and without separation in the chase, right? This is our big fear, separation. So then Suraha goes on to say, from joy, buds of pure pleasure emerge, bursting into blossom of highest pleasure. And so long as outflows are contained, unutterable delight will surely mature, right? And so this kind of leads us to even greater joy, right? Like, you find this description of the four joys, within the context sometimes of Mahamudra, definitely within the context of Tumo, within the context of Karma Mudra, other tantric, practices. This ultimate joy, the highest joy, right, is this joy of the recognition of the natural state. Right? And again, like, we are also a kind of very joy, like kind of like a bliss obsessed culture. If it's not from like, this is just happens to be on my shrine, so I don't carry it around. But like, I offered mezcal to Vajravarahi the other day for somebody who's had a family member who had their 49th day. So we'll either experience joy with mezcal, or joy with sex, or joy with shopping, being a shopaholic, or we're constantly looking to feel good. I need to feel good. I need to feel good. I need to feel good. The ultimate joy, though, is again resting into this vastness. Right? When we rest into this, it begins to magnify. It's kind of like it multiplies, right? From joy, buds of pure pleasure emerge. Looking, beholding can be pure pleasure. Everything is perfect as it is. Everything is naturally liberated as it is. Everything is free as it is. Nothing holds all of the projections upon it. Everything is pure. And this joy bursts into blossom of the highest pleasure. And so long as outflows are contained, unutterable delight will surely mature. And this containment is not, again, this kind of strict kind of, fear-based containment. It is merely the kind of natural discipline that shows up to our practice when we're able to completely feel it within us. Right? And so this last point of kind of, we could say, like natural arising discipline, it's a discipline that's not forced. It's a discipline that arises because this is so incredible. There's a difference between the two, right? If somebody's like, you must meditate every day for X amount of time, right? And you say, okay, yes, please, like, okay, I will do whatever you say. Like, that's one form of discipline, to accept an instruction like that. It's another kind of discipline to begin to actually feel the transformative quality of the practice, right? To feel the blissfulness that arises, the sense of ease, the sense of flow, the sense of balance that causes us to then want to continue, right? So this is that natural containment. Has nothing to do with, be careful, don't go too far with joy, right? But it's properly held, right? That's what that containment refers to. So then Suraha goes on to say, what, where, and by whom are not. Yet the entire event is crucial. Whether love and attachment or desirelessness, the nature of cognition is emptiness. What, where, and by whom don't matter. Yet the entire event is crucial. It doesn't matter, right? But it is sacred. Whether love and attachment or desirelessness, the nature of cognition is emptiness. Everything that arises is empty. Everything that arises lacks any particular self-nature. Whether it's experienced by me or by you or in relationship to some other thing, right? Doesn't matter. And this also is a little uncomfortable sometimes, especially for all of the ways that we can be kind of busybody Dharma practitioners, like trying to figure out, like lately I've been really spending a lot of time thinking about Tilopa's 6 nails. I've probably said this too much already, so it's boring, but these two nails, the one of not controlling and not trying to figure anything out. So what does it mean to sit and not control? This is really, and to really feel down into not controlling, this deep relaxation, this deep ease, effortlessness, and to not figure anything out. To not, okay, what does this mean? How does this correlate to Ati Yoga? How does this correlate to Yidam practice? How does this correlate to the yogas? Right? Doesn't matter. Just resting into this. This is it. This is the main thing. Whether it's love or desirelessness, the nature of cognition is emptiness. It does not matter. We could kind of like this game of spinning a globe and like popping your finger down on it and imagining what part of the world is like. It doesn't matter. All of it is emptiness. And it becomes particularly intense, especially when we begin to recognize, how much we've been controlling ourselves, our thought activity, what we allow to happen or not happen. And this is the like sticky point about both Mahamudra and Dzogchen, right? It's one thing to feel this for ourselves, right? But then, everybody gets a little freaked out about how people look or appear or what they say or what they think even, or how they present, because we're very, we really worked ourselves into this kind of, set of boxes around how we have to appear. And this is actually also very complicated because, it is possible to kind of go down a rabbit hole of saying, of being like Aleister Crowley, do what thou wilt, and that shall be the whole of the law, you know. And, you know, ironically, like, you know, there's actually nothing that is not, you know, out of alignment between a statement like that and the ethos of Ati Yoga or Mahamudra. And that makes people, like, you know, uncomfortable. This is the conundrum piece, right? This is that kind of this is when, after building the huge tower, everybody recognizes that the scaffolding has to go. You know, that structure needs to go. And so there's only one stanza left. And that's this one. Like pigs, we wallow in this sensory mire, but what can stain our pearly mind? Nothing whatsoever can infect us, and by nothing can we ever be bound. So, like pigs, we wallow in the sensory mire. And we do, wallowing, this for breakfast, that for lunch. I want silence. All I get is chaos. You know, feeling, visual consciousness, sound, smell, you know, all the noise, all the, you know, news app noise. Right? We're like, it's like pinball. Right? Those little paddles are knocking us around, right? All these lights going off and sounds, you know, Elton John is singing. Or actually, that's The Who, right? The Who, the pinball wizard, right? The Who. All this noise, all this reactivity, all this fear, all this anxiety, and none of it can stain the mind. This is the irony, right? This is the ultimate conundrum. None of it can stain the mind. You know, for everybody who talks about feeling disempowered in Dharma, you know, situations, that can't stain your mind. And people are like, no, you know, you don't have the capacity to realize this. That can't stain your mind. You know, our fear can't stain our mind. Our loneliness can't stain our mind. Our anxiety can't stain our mind. Our karma can't stain our mind. I mean, that's particularly intense. Right? The prison we're in can't stain our mind. Perhaps that's, you know, what Sras trying to say. Nothing whatsoever can infect us, and by nothing can we ever be bound. And this is the ideal thing you would want to teach your kids, or your neighbors, or anybody you're caring for, or yourself. Right? Nothing whatsoever can infect us, and by nothing can we ever be bound. It sounds very nice, right? You know, it's interesting too, because it doesn't mean, like, you know, throw everything away, right? But it also means, you know, however you're showing up is ultimately okay. You know, and maybe this can also be permission granting to people, to not have to get wrapped up in the busy work, as it were. You know, one of my kids, my son Marcus, is exceptionally smart and and impatient. And so, like, with his homework, especially this year, he's kind of been hitting this wall of, like, doing his homework and not showing the work, right? Not showing how he got to his answers. And I was sitting with him once, and I was like, "Oh yeah, your teacher mentioned that you need to show the work," and he was like, "Why? Why should I do that?" Like, he's like 8 years old. Like, why? I know the answer. This is the answer, and it's right. Who cares, right? Who cares? He's like, I know, like, I know this is annoying, and I know, like, being in this position to have to, tell you to do something you don't want to do, or something that I agree. If like you're getting everything right, who cares? But they want to be able to see, right? So this is kind of like Saraha being like, "Oh, just forget it, man. Like, you know the answer, right? You're right, right? You know the answer. Don't get wrapped up in all of the busy work. You don't need to show your work, as long as you're resting in the natural state." But it's funny because there's part of us, that, and we all have it in us probably to different degrees, like of wanting to, people please or system please, or, for many different reasons. But Saraha's really like, look, just let it go, let it all go. And there's, I was reading, there are a number of different, kind of, I guess you could say, like, analyses of Saraha's biography, because he's interesting, because was a, from what people best understand now, he was both a practitioner of the Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition. And one of the easy ways they kind of made this whole thing work was they say that during the day he practiced the Hindu tradition, and at night he practiced the Buddhist tradition. So it was, in doing all of his like Brahmanic stuff, because he was regarded a Brahmin during the day, and at night he practiced Master Mahamudra. And there's an element of kind of naivete and convenience to this kind of bifurcation, but on another level, like, even if we were to say that, okay, who knows, like, about that, that whether or not it cleaved that way, maybe we can say that he definitely occupied this kind of complex position, in relationship to hybrid spiritual practice, right? Which is more unique. I mean, it's not particularly unique, actually. Like, look at all of us, right? And our, how we came to Dharma, all of our, how we regard our spirituality, on an individual level. And that this particular loose, free Dharma is coming from somebody like that, I think really is worth letting it sink into our hearts. That, we will worry about purity sometimes. When we do often get, I mean, you see this on Facebook all the time, the kind of purity police of people like say, "Oh, is that an authentic teacher? Is that authentic? Is this authentic?" And it's usually white men are really involved in being the voluntary, like, purity squad, making sure that everything is pure and correct and all this, failing to recognize that they're kind of just whitewashing, as it were, in many ways, this kind of living, breathing, fluid Dharma that is not containable, right? That is beyond purity and impurity. And I think that, for us as practitioners of Mahamudra or Hatha Yoga or anything, we do benefit from loosening our grip a little bit and loosening our worry about a lot of this stuff, right? And, hopefully we can all have access to teachers who can also encourage us to loosen up some of this, right? That it's not, the target is not tiny. The target is all phenomena. So you can't miss. And because you can't miss, then you don't need to worry so much, right? We don't need to put ourselves in these positions of intense fear. And I see this intense fear in a lot of Dharma communities, especially when it comes to, like, non-conceptual meditation. Like, oh, that's very dangerous. You should be careful, because this is going to impact your ethics, or you need to follow this, or you need to follow that first, or you need to get wrapped up in all this stuff. And I don't think that's particularly helpful nor accurate. Um, and so this is also, it's also interesting to kind of, reflect on how in Saraha's life and, in, his biographies, he also ends up being persecuted at one point. The king actually ends up trying to have him killed in many different kinds of ways or tortured. And again, these kind of themes in the story get magical, and people can believe whatever they want to about that stuff. But I think, whether or not one believes in magic or not isn't the point. I think that it is likely the case that the persecution was real in some form. Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava was persecuted at one point. Like, a lot. It's These are things that I think are worth remembering, because non-duality is never convenient. Non-duality is never convenient, especially for systems. But it doesn't mean, non-duality is the enemy. And it doesn't mean that non-duality is evil, or non-duality, ruins people. There are plenty of good cases for the, this latter, right? Where because of people's experience of non-duality, they're like, oh, I'm above all this stuff. I can do whatever I want, right? I'm not trying to defend that, but I am trying to defend non-duality. It's inconvenient. It doesn't make our lives easier. In fact, it makes our lives more complicated. But when we experience it, there's a sweetness to it, right? That is unlike anything else in the world. Non-duality may very well kind of go against like the human survival instinct, right? We've created all these structures around hope and fear, and societal structures, and all this is basically like created this system where we have way too many humans on the planet, right? It's served us ultimately well, right, from a survival standpoint, until it's tipped the scales, and now it's contributing to our annihilation. Non-duality brings us back to being. Being is rooted in harmonization with the environment, both the external environment, but also relational environment, right? It's hard to be a Mahamudra practitioner, and really be connected, and to be a jerk. I think, it's easy to be a Mahamudra practitioner and be a jerk if you don't really care about connecting with others. But I think if you're really not caring about connecting with others, your practice really isn't as good as you think it is. I think really authentic practice of Mahamudra and Dzogchen leads to a very open heart, right? A heart that is so open that the suffering of others is overwhelming, right? And the beautiful thing about that is it also means that we don't have to be so wrapped up with holding on to these things like, these amulets rooted in fear. Oh my God, I must do this. I must do that. I must transform my mind. Well, if you want to transform your mind, sit with it. Right? If you want to transform your mind, stop projecting onto objects and people and things and systems and, races and genders. If you want to transform your mind, let go of labeling. If you want to develop the heart of compassion, right, rest in the joy that arises from not labeling and letting everything just be as it is, including other people. And so there's this kind of built-in, what does Dr. Nita like to call it? All-inclusive, right? It's this like cruise that's all-inclusive. That's also hard to trust too, because we're so systems addicted, structure addicted, hierarchy addicted. binary addicted. So anyway, that's the end of the song. And there was a lot of commentary. And but yeah, I want to see if people have thoughts or feelings or reflections or anything that feels alive. You can raise your hand and put in the, yeah, there you go, Richard. I think you're muted.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a reflection, and I just want to acknowledge the incredible value of what we're doing. This kind of presentation of the work of the Mahasiddhas really speaks to me. It's a form of Buddhism that really attracts me very greatly, as opposed to what you've called in the past congregational Buddhism, the idea of a teacher and a small group of people. And I've come to feel in a really genuine way that this is like a sangha for me, because once a week we sit together and share this extraordinary tradition, and something that, I don't know, I value really, really highly, this opportunity to, the Sangha is this experience of Mahamudra and the pith instructions that you offer every single week. And without you, that would not be available in the same way. So I just want to express my appreciation for that. And also, I know that things are changing in Burmese Bhasha, and I want to take this opportunity to really kind of beg you to continue doing this, because I, for one, find it enormously valuable. That's all. I'm done.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. I will definitely not stop doing this ever. So, that, yeah. I love what you said. I mean, like Mahamudra is, it's the temple, it's the retreat place, it's our breath, it's our thoughts, it's our, like you say, it's the Sangha, it's the Lama. I mean, this is like, when you really look at, within in the like more formal, like karma kagyu context of Mahamudra practice, when they talk about all appearance being the Lama, like that's what this is, right? All appearance being our guru, our mind being our guru, ultimately, right? I mean, this is what's also made it so controversial. Like, it's so fascinating how both Dzogchen and Mahamudra have been folded into these, big systems, but they're very iconoclastic in their essence, and they're against systems, ultimately. And so it's not to say that all of the lineages have done something bad, but it is to say that to practice these to fruition means we need to edge up on this kind of Mahasiddha model. And that's scary for systems, because Mahasiddhas are unpredictable, and they don't pay dues, and they don't follow rules. And it doesn't mean we should all go, crazy. Because, Bokor Rinpoche was pretty quick to say at one point during one of his Mahamudra seminars, like, don't get weird. But it also doesn't mean, like, don't be a slave to these systems that it's not that they don't benefit us, but when we see things like, oh God, what was it? It was the Kunja Gyalpo, right? The Kunja Gyalpo, this is just Dzogchen now, but the Kunja Gyalpo, this amazing text, was outlawed in Tibet for centuries, right? It was outlawed because it was so free, because there was this, induction of freedom, the implication of freedom, the the association of freedom. When you have lines in these texts that are like, our practice is no practice, right? Our temple is no temple, right? There is both a personal and a political implication here, you know, and it also just begs us, like, you know, when in our aspiration prayers, like, you know, when we talk about all beings being free, right, Richard, what you're talking about is like the ultimate sense of this, just all beings, you know, being totally free.
Mm, mm.
And what a beautiful thing.
And it's archaic in a really wonderful way. It connects me with something that's so kind of unavailable most of the time. So
Yeah.
I think Alistair might have a question, and then
okay.
Prince, I see your hand.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Alistair.
Hi, Lama Justin. Yeah. Talking today about structure, and I noticed that notion of the cage, you know, being in a cage of limitations, being in a cage of your own fears, being in a cage of your own projection. And that cage, how we, I mean, I was reflecting on myself when I first sort of had a taste of some sort of sanity was through the Koji lineage, and how that cage, how that's a cage too. I mean, it's a cage still, but it's got jewels on it, you know, it's all pretty, I belong to this and I belong to that. And I was just reflecting on it because of something Chögyal Nampa Norbu said, and I was just kind of sitting with it last night, and then you were bringing it forth in the talk today. And I just want to say it was like he wrote, in general, people say we are following Dharma, like it was a religion created by Buddha Shakyamuni. That is not the correct point of view. The Buddha never created any type of school or religion. The Buddha was a totally enlightened being, someone beyond our limited point of view. The teaching of the Buddha is to have presence in that knowledge. And yeah, I really want to follow on Richard and really acknowledge what you're presenting every Wednesday, because in a way, that idea of you'll keep coming back to the point of view, but you are cutting the ground of that anywhere to stand. And yeah, I just want to really acknowledge that, Lama Justin, and really appreciate what you're bringing out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. I appreciate that. Yeah. One of my biggest regrets is I never met Namkhai Norbu. Like what an incredible person he was. And in fact, like, I'm gonna be brutally honest, like I used to run this Dharma Center for Gyaltsen Rinpoche in Brooklyn, and there was this lovely Slovenian woman who would come, and she was like, oh, Namkhai Norbu is giving all these transmissions. This was like, I guess they were all online. And, coming from, the Karma Kaji can be so puritanical. And I was like, online transmissions, like, and this was like, probably like, oh, well, I guess it was like 12 or something. He'd already been doing it for a while. And I was so skeptical, I was like, well, what do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. Like, this is crazy. This is weird. But then one day, in the parking lot on Rikers, when I was a volunteer, I remembered, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. Like, rather than go home, I'm going to sit in the car for like an hour and like just receive all these transmissions that he's giving. So ahead of his time, like just by like maybe even centuries, so incredible. I mean, I'm really, really just in awe and impressed by him. Yeah, the Mahasiddhas, there's never been like much of a, when I started learning about them, I was like, this is it for me. Like, these are the people. And my personal feeling about this is that there is an unbroken transmission of this kind of, Mahasiddha style of practice that is always available to us, especially when we just rest naturally, into the natural state. Like, it is right there. And we know it's helpful for us to begin to kind of trust into this, and even I was reading this Hatha Yoga text last year that was, the author was like, it's important for people to have the initial empowerment for this, but it's also important to acknowledge the fact that the empowerment is not necessary because the mind is inherently pure. And it's so beautiful, right? And really essentially you can go any which way with that, right? You could say, okay, well, just for kind of cross our T's and dot our I's, let's do the empowerment too. But with respect to like the archaeology of transmission, right? We fall into this kind of strange way of thinking, and this is like a perennialism that is really interesting. Like this like kind of human obsession with finding the true thread. The true thread is constant. The true thread is always there. The true thread is there for all of us now. It was there when we were born. It was in our past life. Is in our future lives. Like, you can't escape it. But there's a very fascinating human predilection to try to find the original pure thing. Right? Purity is such a fascinating curse, even, like our obsession with purity. And obviously we see this with respect to race and gender and politics and colonialism and everything, right? The search for purity, the search for the true source, the search for blah 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 blah. Yeah, and then we have people like Saraha, Garb Dorje, Tulopa, Naropa, Lakshmankara. So it's not just men. Magic Lobjo and Sukha Siddhi. The purity is like when you hold a mirror up to yourself. Like that's the source. That's the thread. Like, that's it. It's so much easier to just follow, though. Right? It's so much easier to objectify. So much easier to, I wanted to be, and I'm sorry, Prince, that I keep blabbing. But I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was young, like first an Egyptologist and then an archaeologist. And I met this guy, actually, the person who ran this Buddhist studies program, study abroad program that I was in college. The first time I went up to India, I was asking him back then, I was like, how did you even like come to Dharma? And he was like, oh, I wanted to be like an oceanographer. And I was obsessed with diving into the ocean. And then he was like, and then I came to India, and then I realized I was just interested in diving into my own mind. And that was a metaphor that like just clicked. And he's like, meditation was it. And so for me, like this obsession with archaeology as even younger than my kids are now, like I wanted to be an Egyptologist when I was 5 or 6, like has to do with like finding the source, right? Finding the source. And that has, and then eventually I became, I kind of intuited that I can find the source through religious studies. Okay, now I need to get more specific. I'll find the source through Buddhism. I need to get more specific, find the source, and then even more specific, right? Because I'm not going to find the source in mind training. Just kidding. I will find the source in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, because that's how we connect. Vajravarahi too, like, these kinds of practices of plugging directly in. And the fact that we can all plug in directly, and there's not just one person who is like, I found the source. I took my kids to go see the latest Indiana Jones movie yesterday because they're home from school. And that's what those movies are all about, finding the source, like, finding the one thing and like killing all these people in the process, just blowing things up. But, this is like, I do genuinely feel this, that we are all wired to find the source in one way or another, like in a lot of the work that we do. And it doesn't always need to be occupational work either. Like, I think humans like are constantly craving returning to the natural state in one way or another, right? And we have this like within Christianity is like a return to the Garden of Eden, right? You find this like, perhaps even, in the Black church with homecoming, at death, coming home, returning home. You find this in so many different faith traditions that the Buddhist tradition is not an outlier. Like there's some like larger human wiring around this, like returning back to the source, something worth considering. Prince. Oh, I think you're.
There we go. I got it now.
Yeah.
Sorry, had to
Yeah.
unmute there. Thank you for today's teaching. My question is around the scaffolding. So one scaffold that I'm having a really hard time taking down, and that is fear of going mad. And in particular, we talked about duality and is there a duality between madness and non-madness? Or is there not? And in particular, I have, a history of mental illness, whatever you want to call it, trauma, blah, blah. Sorry, I didn't mean to blah, blah it. But what I mean to say is that how can I stay whole of mind as I explore these teachings deeper? And I finding liberation in them, and it's like it's right there, but there's that last, well, who knows if it's the last piece, but one of the last pieces is just like, no, you don't, like you're gonna lose your shit,
Yeah, no, thank you. This is a really good point. And it's especially interesting because, like, one of the things that often accompanies Mahasiddhas is, apparent mad behavior, right? Like being, very, very unconventional, being unconventional to the point of, being questionable in terms of, are you actually even awake? I think the healthiest thing to do is to titrate our practice based on our, situational dynamics. The one like shadow side of all this like dark retreat stuff I've been doing like out in the open is that I get so many emails from people who are like, I got one the other day. It's like, I want to do 3 months of dark retreat and I don't have any experience with meditation. What advice do you have for me? And some of these practices can be very destabilizing, right? So it's important to kind of care for the vehicle, right? And the vehicle is our relative, our relative structure, right? Which is body, speech, mind, also emotional body, mental body, and all of this. And so it becomes important to care for that, because that is the thing that that will help carry us across the finish line, as it were. I think the other thing is like this, the other shadow side of non-conceptual practices, and actually maybe even like the Western approach to Buddhism, is that it is very disembodied because it's mind. And I think, maybe some of this is like, not particularly helped by the fact that Buddhism kind of really has a strong connection to academia. And so a lot of things that get translated are the mind, mind stuff, and not embodiment, and not you know, this kind of yoking of the profundity of experience with what it means to be, which also involves being incarnate. And incarnate means, you know, we have a physical body, we also have an emotional body, and we can parse this out. You know, these are not necessarily quote unquote Buddhist labels, but we could say we have an emotional body, a mental body, you know, a psychological body, all of these things which are there, right? And within the context, especially of you know, Western medicine and science, are important to address. So I think that if we titrate our practice to support being embodied, and actually also, this is actually not also taught much either, but you know, using embodied felt sense as a support for the way practice is unfolding, right? If we practice and we become completely destabilized, we might have been following a practice text, you know, by the letter, but we might find ourselves in a hospital, right? And so there's a discrepancy here, right? It means that, you know, the practice has been kind of unbalanced. But I think part of this too, it becomes problematic in a culture where most people are really trying to run away from their suffering really quick, like too quickly, right? More quickly than they can actually effectively hold in their practice, because they're so disembodied, right? I want to get away from this, man. This physicality, right? This physical world, this physical experience is too much. It is, you know, whatever it is, it's like driving me mad. It's causing me pain. It's making me feel destabilized. I don't want to be here. Mind only, you know. And I think that this is a big problem, you know. I think with Mahamudra and Dzogchen, if you can use your body like a tuning fork, or relate to your body like a tuning fork, that it is as sensitive as Rigpa itself, right? And when clarity arises in the experience of mind, we feel that in a really profound way in our body, right? But if we push and push and push, if we're too heady and we're pushing ourselves too far, right, it will cause, you know, I mean, I've seen this happen with people where it will cause heart palpitations, or it will, you know, so it will be more of a physical, you know, destabilization. But then of course, psychological destabilization is also always a risk. In fact, there's a colophon to this short dark retreat text that Jamgon Khantrul Lodrotai compiled, and in this, you know, he mentions the risk of basically like psychotic break from practicing these practices if one isn't necessarily prepared enough. And prepared doesn't just mean meditation. Prepared means being like you know, comfortable, stable within oneself, you know, able to you know, go into that kind of much more rigorous kind of practice. And then I've also come across there's a kind of like basically a footnote from Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso saying the same thing. That's why this practice isn't found in the Karma Kaji tradition that much these days, because there was a period of people kind of just, you know, pushing themselves to the point of being like destabilized. And so this is also where, like, I think that, like, in the, like, you know, so for example, one of my teachers, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, he was teaching Tumo to me, and he was telling me that the previous Kala Rinpoche told him, he's like, you know, however you are with your body, not just with Tumo, but with everything, he's like, you know, let it all be beauty. Like your body, as you practice Dharma, should be an expression of beauty. As you sit, this should be a practice of beauty. You know, and I would go so far as to say beauty is equated with harmony, harmonization. I think we could take a page from Taoism in this, and, like, you know, resting with this kind of flow, right? And if we're attuned to flow, and if we're attuned to ease, and if we're attuned to really listening and not having this kind of Cartesian mechanistic relationship to our body, that it is a machine that I'm just going, I'm going to like work this through. It's going to die anyway, so who cares? And the only thing that's important is that seed of Vajramind, the blah, 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 blah. Right? That's a capitalist, colonialist, manifestation of like white neurosis, that gets imbibed by so many people, right? And so like how to come back, so it's like it's like Bhumi Sparsha, right? Is the term is a reference to the Buddha touching the earth, right? Asking the earth to be witness to their awakening. So let the earth, right, which is grounding, right, be present in practice, but also let your physical body be present in practice. Then, of course, within that is our emotional matrix, psychological matrix. Let that be like, present. And then listen to what destabilizes you. Like I was actually just thinking about this last night. Thinking about, sometimes I'll hear like Rod, in my head. And I was thinking about, Rod talking about, he often says like, protect your energy. And so in these moments when, people will email me these like really intense questions that are scary, right? They're scary because it's, people not listening to themselves, or people who are, you can tell they're very, 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 very goal oriented. And I'm not going to begrudge anybody the accomplishment of their path, right? That's definitely not, a motivator for me. But the intensity of seeing and experiencing people so hungry and in a rush, in a non-stable way, like wanting to manifest it all right now with no experience, no time. I need to, and then I need to be a teacher. How do I become a teacher? Right? That these are moments where I hear Rod saying, protect your energy. And this causes me to, need to do that. Right. And so this idea of protecting our energy, like having healthy boundaries, in the sense of like, the way Dharma protectors, serve as a manifestation of boundaries or a container. We often find this kind of metaphor of, our practice being the container that holds the Dharma, and we need to make sure that the container is clean, right? And of course, we can become obsessed with purity too much when we think of this, but the general idea, right, is like preparing ourselves for practice as we engage in practice. And so, and it's we should just move at the pace that feels good, right? We don't have to worry about rushing the goal, even though our culture, come on, when are you gonna get there? When are you gonna get there? Right? And that's the way we justify this whole thing, right? It's like when you become Deepak Chopra and have TV shows and all these books, right, and become famous, a household name, and on Oprah, well, then it's all, this whole thing has panned out, right? You've become successful. And the one thing that we see from all of these Mahasiddhas is like, that's not what it's about. It's never been about that. So like listening to ourselves, trusting ourselves, respecting our present embodiment, right? A lot of the things that can sometimes feel like a limitation when we are endlessly comparing ourselves to others, right? We don't recognize the strength in those things that might seem like flaws or character flaws, or they become usually great ways of connecting with others and being a support for others, and we can run away from these things. Like my relationship to death and dying sometimes had been times where I was like, oh man, like I don't want to constantly be associated with that. I don't want to constantly be in those spaces. But then I invariably find myself in those spaces. I can't shake it. And so part of me is like, okay, fine. Like, don't shake it, Justin. Just let it be. Like, it's part of my expression, right? And we all have things that are wonderfully connective like this. And then we all have our kind of places where it behooves us to be tender with ourselves. And once we have that tenderness, though, and respect the beauty of being tender and slow and gentle with ourselves, the more we're able to actually kind of appreciate the dynamic wisdom in the energy of these things. I don't know if that's helpful, Prince.
I mean, I took in as much as I could. You're kind of on another level, but yeah, it was helpful. It got me further along, especially around titrating and listening to my body, and the practices aren't going anywhere. So there's no rush. Just it's okay to go slow. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the other thing about like speediness, like, and I've had to do this to some extent too, is like feel into my own fear and insecurities. It's like secure attachment. I was talking with my wife about this. Luckily, like, knock on wood, Winston and Marcus are like dreams, and everything seems very healthy, right? Like our relationships and all this. And this idea of like secure attachment with our practice, secure attachment with the Dharma, secure attachment with all of this is so valuable. So even, and then looking at like places of quote unquote insecure attachment around like accomplishment, around production of some kind of result, around timeliness. Oh, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And learning to recognize, maybe even identify where we picked up some of these kind of unhelpful ways of thinking, and lovingly letting them go. Like, it's okay. Like, maybe I am. So like, I'll give some examples. Like my father, so in my family was kind of like uprooted from Europe on both sides of the family. My father's side, during like the tail end of World War II, like right after World War II, they immigrated to Australia. My dad grew up there. And on my mother's side, after World War II, they immigrated to the US. And everything that they knew was completely disrupted. Their way of being, self-identity, their relationship to the past, right? Totally severed. Like, I don't know anybody. I met my grandmother on my father's side. That's the only that's as far back as I know. And on my mother's side, my great-grandparents, because they eventually came to the US, but I don't know anything about my family on either side, really prior to the 1940s. And my father imbibed a lot from his father about being successful, like, you must achieve, blah, blah, blah. And, because my grandfather was obsessed with trying to like reclaim the family's greatness or whatever. And so as a young boy, my dad absorbed that. And then later, when he was raising me, it felt supportive for him to do this, is to just keep telling me that you got to be the best. And then I still remember, like, when I was young or I was in high school or something, obsessed with Tibetan Buddhism already. And my dad was like, oh, that's great. You'll be the next Bob Thurman. And I was like, even then I was like, I don't want that. Like, I want to be me, And so it's like, obviously coming from a place of love in his voice, right? And, okay, that would be great to be that successful or whatever. But there's always a shadow to these kinds of things, right? Where it's like, wow, that's actually hard to hear, right? There's pressure now. Now I need to like be like him. What the hell? I just want to be me, and so feeling into these kinds of things, right? And like removing these threads, like just letting them self-liberate. Like, I don't need to perform that way. I don't need to do this. And, I don't need to figure out my family's past either. Like that doesn't have to be my work. I don't want to do that, and like just coming back to, we like letting go of everything that other people and systems and cultures expect us to hold. Right. And this is also very kind of Saraha-esque too. It's like, again, the last, this very last stanza, like pigs, we wallow in the sensory mire, but what can stain our pearly mind? Nothing whatsoever can infect us, and by nothing can we ever be bound. If we hold that in our heart, all of the kind of generational traumas that recreate themselves, no matter what our family pasts are, or, locations in this culture or other cultures are, that can't stain us, right? We are free of even that, right? And sometimes there's a lot of work that needs to be done with that. And it could definitely be argued that work takes a long time. And I guess I ultimately believe that on some level it does. But confronting this too is really helpful. Like, in order to get free now, we also need to kind of liberate the past, right? In order to get free now, we also need to liberate the future, right? But in order to be able to liberate the past and the future, we have to recognize that neither the past or the future have any particular real effect on us, like at our core, and that takes some settling into. Sometimes it feels really palpable and pertinent. Other times it feels like a pipe dream, So anyway, I think we're at time. Yeah, thank you, Prince. Maybe we can dedicate this merit to being free. May all beings be able to be completely free in the past, free in the future, free from expectation, free from pressures, free from all the things that previous generations have done or not done. May all of us be free. May all beings be able to rest into the immediacy of the primordial purity of their mind. May all stains be recognized to be illusion. And may all of our potential manifest in every single moment with clarity and beauty, blissfulness, and joy. So I want to thank you all for being here with me today, and anybody watching this in the future. And yeah, so I won't be here with you next week, but I will be with you all the next week. So take care of yourselves and see you soon. Take care, everybody.